Welcome to part two. Let's get back to work, shall we? Now, oh geez, I'm like all over the place. Okay, so we just did the whole discussion on muscle protein synthesis, right? Everybody understands what it is. Let's move forward from here. How much protein can we absorb per meal? This is like the question of social media. Everybody fights in the comment section. You're an absolute idiot if you're eating a pound of steak because you're wasting the protein. Everything in between. Don't read ahead. Don't read ahead. Okay. So you may have heard that you can't digest more than 30 grams of protein in one sitting. Who's heard this? Okay. The notion of a protein intake, like threshold, ceiling, or whatever, it derives from like earlier studies that observed increased nitrogen losses in the urine with increased protein intake. So that's what the study was. This was thought to mean that the extra protein was wasted, right? Because like nitrogen was higher in the urine concentration, so they just start like, oh, all that protein it's just being wasted, right? So these are usually all measured around the spike of muscle protein synthesis, which I get if that's our goal, but is that my only goal, right? Is our only goal to spike muscle protein synthesis from eating protein? Like the only reason we're eating protein is because like, oh, I need to spike my muscle protein synthesis right now and be anabolic. No, absolutely not. You look like a freaking, that's weird. Think about it like that. I can hear my dogs like getting ready to just attack each other. And I'm just like anticipating the bark. Hey! I'm in a session. My God. No respect. Okay. However, your body doesn't use dietary protein only to make muscle or even only to make other proteins. It also uses the nitrogen from the dietary proteins amino acids to synthesize important non-protein molecules such as purines and pyrimidines, I can never say that, the building blocks of nucleic acids such as DNA and RNA. So, and then let's also remember in the beginning slide, we talked about there's 7 different types of protein that all play roles in the body. So let's move on. Your small intestines can only absorb and store, or can also absorb and store a large amount of amino acids ready to be used when your body needs them. Remember when we talked about the nitrogen pooling for future use, right? Being regurgitated here. So if Dr. Campbell, the guy leading the industry here, shows us that we can even lose fat on higher protein, we know our body uses protein for more than just spiking muscle protein synthesis. We also know that a positive nitrogen retention allows for muscle preservation or anabolism. Wouldn't it make sense for us to be able to eat more protein in one meal and it not be wasted? What do you guys think? Doesn't that just make a ton of sense? That your body's going to be like, well, if you eat 100 grams of protein in a sitting, and when I'm on like dieting hard and I'm at 300 plus grams of protein, my first meal is usually 100 grams of protein. I usually knock out 100 grams first thing in the morning. Does that mean that my body is taking that 30 grams and going, well, we spiked, let's just go ahead and piss the rest of it out? No, absolutely not. It's going to use it for a substantial amount of other processes in the body, right? All the way down to building up your RNA and your DNA. Protein is super freaking important, dude. Now, again, a good thought process here is if protein's higher in a dieting phase and it has a higher thermic effect of food, well, in theory, you're going to be burning more calories throughout your diet than if protein was lower, right? If those calories were allocated towards carbohydrates, you're going to actually burn less calories overall if those calories were for carbohydrates than compared to protein. Does that make sense for everybody? Cool. Now, obviously, this isn't going to be like a substantial, like you're not going to get an additional pound of fat loss a week by eating an extra 25 protein compared to carbs, but those calories over time can add up. Moving on. Increases in metabolic rate from protein. Why is this important? So this is pretty cool. Protein consumption signals an increase of 25% in metabolic rate. That's pretty substantial. Carbs and fats less than a 10% increase when we eat them. So this just furthers the notion, right? Higher thermic effect of food, increasing your metabolic rate. Those two are more than likely completely correlated. But we can see now, number-wise, the substantial difference between the metabolic uptick benefits of protein compared to carbs or fats. It provides us with more energy, more calories, aids in weight loss, keeping it off, helps with more quality sleep while burning more calories during rest, right? So that is pretty freaking awesome. So a higher metabolic rate equals pretty much everything we could possibly want out of our physique, right? Like you having a higher metabolic rate, if somebody could show me one downside to that, I'll give you the course and you guys can start running the classes here because it doesn't exist. A higher metabolic rate, you're even going to be less prone to disease later on in your life. If you have lower percentages of body fat, you have more muscle on your body, you have a higher metabolic rate, you're actually, I think it's like 90% less prone to all major diseases or something. I don't know if anybody else read that study. I can correlate that with me or correct my number, but it is something around that. That's like extremely intense for having good body composition into your later years. So moving on. What do we need to worry about? This is one that we hear all the time. Too much protein harmful on the kidneys. Is too much protein harmful in our liver? Well, no. Can we see negatives reflected in blood work from too much protein? Now, here's the thing. Just because something is high or off of the normal range for an individual in blood work does not mean it's negative. Right? Just because we see red on a blood work does not mean it's negative. You got to remember that these ranges are for the average person. The average person is not wolfing down 250 grams of protein a day. You know what I mean? So blood intake can be elevated if protein's too high. We can also see it drop if protein is too low. Can you, come on, my goodness. It can also increase serum creatinine levels. I have not personally seen any health issues or flags from high protein intake in healthy individuals. I have not seen it once in all my years of coaching. I've never seen it, but what's the key word in this sentence?
Healthy
individuals. Okay. If somebody's super unhealthy and like they've got liver disease or, extremely poor kidney function, higher protein could serve us a problem there if it's adding in more stress on the kidneys. But again, I have not seen a single negative issue from high protein intake in any healthy individuals whatsoever. So, and if your clients are like, I'm scared for my kidneys because you have me eating, 10 grams of protein over my body weight. That's just not a thing. Okay. Does anybody have any other questions around like this?
Yeah, I have a question.
Yeah.
Okay. So when you were talking about in the previous slide about a certain amount of protein intake in like one sitting, or I guess it's the slide before this one too, certain amount of protein per setting. Now, would that differ depending on the type of protein it is, right? Versus like a whole source protein, like obviously like meats, chicken, things like that are broken down a lot slower in the body. So you're not actually getting all that protein right that instant, but like 3 scoops of protein powder, for example, right? Because by that logic, you could put 3-4 scoops of protein powder in a glass of water, chug that down and be like, oh, that's 100 grams of protein, right? So where's kind of the line drawn between like a whole food versus a supplementation in that aspect, especially with digestion?
Well, so with regards of like, if we're eating chicken, it's taking a lot longer for us to digest it than say a protein shake. I would say, yeah, it's pretty fast, but it's not anything super substantial. But I'm also going to assume that the individual I'm referencing in this would be fully like masticating their food before they eat it, because pretty much like 80 to 85% of the digestion is done in your mouth. Like you chewing up your food is like 80% of the digestion process. Now, if you're woofing down, big bites and you're swallowing pieces of chicken whole, like people do that. People eat really fast and don't chew their food all the way. Yeah, it's going to be a substantially longer, Mason. It's going to be a substantially longer digestive period than if they took their time, chewed it all thoroughly in their mouth and then swallowed it. But to answer your question, I kind of will just say the same thing that I did is your body is not going to have this intake of 100 grams of protein from your shake go, okay, we got 30 grams, we spiked protein synthesis, we don't need anything else. It will pull reserves for you to have later. Now, if we're like, we know metabolism wise, you're either anabolic or catabolic, right? There's no point in time where your body is like nothing, right? It's either breaking down or building up. It's either one of the same. So if we know having a healthy or a higher or a positive, nitrogen balance is going to help preserve muscle mass and keep us anabolic, it would make more sense to me to have more protein than I need consistently throughout the day than, quote unquote, risk it. Now, obviously, if, you go 2 hours without protein, you're not just going to start losing all your muscle mass, but just looking at it broad here. But in my opinion, based off of my current knowledge on the subject, no, I don't think it would make a substantial difference. I think your body will still utilize it.
But would it make a difference in digestion?
Well, that just depends on how you digest. Like me personally, I can eat, like when I was intermittent fasting, my first meal was a pound of steak, 4 whole eggs, 600 grams of potatoes, and a massive salad for my first meal. It was like 160 grams of protein, and I was fine.
Yeah.
But it's really dependent on the person. And that's what I was talking about with clients' digestion is you have to figure out where that line is for them, where they can digest meals. So let's just look at the most practically, let's say I've got Kendall eating 200 grams of protein a day and she eats 5 meals a day. Well, the easiest thing to do here is we could split up 40 grams of protein in every single meal, right? It's an even distribution. Her digestion is probably going to be fine if we know that 200 grams is her thing. Now, if she misses a meal one day and she decides to add a protein shake to her meal and get 80 grams of protein in that meal, and she ends up becoming bloated and has some like lower abdominal distension or gets bloated after she eats protein, then there are other things that we have to look into there. And obviously there's a threshold for her that is being crossed. So we could say, well, why don't we go, 60 grams of protein in that meal? And then the next day she goes, oh, I wasn't bloated. Okay, cool. So we know that Kendall's threshold per meal for her digestive system is probably roughly 60 grams a day or 60 grams a meal. You know what I mean? Because again, remember guys, if we can't digest a meal, we can't utilize and optimize a meal. So does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does.
Okay, cool. Anybody else? Questions right now? Cool. Let's move on. What types of protein sources are best? I'm a very open-minded person, but I will also completely die on the hill that animal protein sources will always reign superior. There's just, at this point, there's just indisputable evidence to support that animal protein is far superior. You're getting all the amino acid breakdowns. And I'm a huge advocate of red meat. I don't think you can beat red meat as a protein source, truly. So we're looking for sources with complete protein chains. That's what's key here. Plant-based protein sources, I honest to God, I really don't prefer to utilize them. However, if we have a vegan, vegetarian, etc., then we have a choice. Pea protein would be my go-to here. It's a complete protein. It has all 9 essential amino acids. So if I have an individual who is, vegan for like moral reasons or even religious reasons, that's fine. Let's use pea protein. If I have them in general, I'm probably going to recommend them utilize 1 to 2 scoops of EAAs per day anyways, just so that we are getting those building blocks of protein. And like this also completely just crushes the argument that like we're not meant to eat protein. Like our RNA and DNA literally is built from protein. It quite literally is in our DNA that we need to eat protein or at least get amino acids in. So pea protein is my go-to. It honestly does not, I haven't found one that tastes good. I've tried it. It's not good, but neither is not eating steak. So like you chose your fate, you know what I mean? It's as far as I'm concerned. And then collagen is one that a lot of people throw in, but I think it's really important to note that collagen is not a complete protein. So I don't really like, people are like, I want collagen for my skin or my hair or not to have wrinkles. Here's the truth about collagen, just a tidbit for you guys, for your clients. There is actually no substantial evidence in preventative usage of collagen. Like there's not a single study that supports the fact that if I start using collagen now, I'll have less wrinkly skin or I'll have like tighter skin down the road. The only evidence that exists with collagen is elderly people like who have like really stretched out skin or whatever, utilizing it and seeing a tighten up over time. That's the only evidence. There's nothing that supports you using it now is going to benefit you from like an anti-aging standpoint. Just a fun fact. For me, if I have a client utilizing collagen, totally fine with it. Not saying there's not health benefits from it. I usually don't like more than 10 grams a day max. I want them eating their protein and I want complete protein chains. So if we have anything that's like not a complete protein, 10 grams a day is usually my max I'm willing to offer them. Yeah. Any questions on these? Pretty straightforward. Cool. Let's move on. What happens to protein after we eat it? So we're going to be doing calls on protein. I think next week I can cram carbs and fats together in a call. Protein's just very intense. So there's 3 enzymes, one for protein, one that breaks down carbs, and ones that break down fat. We'll get to those in all the calls. But the enzyme that breaks down protein is called proteases. I'm not a scholar. All right. I'm really not. So proteases breaks protein down into smaller chains of amino acids with the help of hydrochloric acid. The protein is then absorbed and used by cells. Then when glycogen is used up, muscle protein is broken down into amino acids. The liver then uses amino acids to create glucose. This is known as glucogenesis. So essentially, like, I'm trying to think of how to articulate this or like turn this into like does everybody understand this? Okay, cool. That helps my brain. That helps my brain trying to dissect it further. Okay. So some things to consider when eating protein sources. Fully cooking protein is essential. That is so damn important. The drinking the egg whites thing or the doing the raw eggs, you know, like you're in like the old school fighting movies where they're cracking the eggs and drinking them before they run. Like you're getting about, and I don't know if this number is correct. I think it's either 50 or 60% being taken away from the protein by not cooking it. So if you're getting 30 grams of egg whites and you're drinking it raw, you're actually only getting like 15 grams of protein from those egg whites because you're not cooking it to allow the amino acids to come out.
Is it because
egg whites? What?
Is it because of like the denaturing of it, of the protein?
I'm actually not entirely sure. I probably should have added that in when I looked at the study. I just grabbed onto like the percentage of protein lost. I could, if you guys want, I can go refine the study and link it in the Facebook group so you guys can read up on it.
I think it's because of like the denaturing of it is why.
I mean, that makes the most amount of sense to me.
Yeah.
Yeah. But anyways,
like sushi,
yeah,
tuna, salmon, that needs
Well,
better if it's cooked in.
that when it comes to like an actual animal source, I'm actually not sure. This specific study was done with egg whites.
Gotcha.
I would assume you're getting pretty close to the same amount of protein eating it raw from an animal. I wouldn't assume
like, I was gonna say like rare steak and stuff. I would assume it's pretty comparable to it being cooked.
Yeah.
So egg whites.
I think that was a great question though, because it definitely opens up a conversation that I wasn't really thinking about. But again, it would make sense to me. Like egg whites aren't like a naturally derived thing from an animal. You know what I mean? That's just what the study showed. I really would argue that it's probably the same.
Okay.
I could be wrong. So this is really cool. So if you're eating an incomplete protein, like if you're eating like, let's say you're eating egg whites and you're only getting like 8 essential amino acids or something, or you're eating like a plant that only has like 4, you can actually combine 2 incomplete protein sources in a meal to create a complete protein meal. That's a pretty cool like nugget there for people who don't have, like people who are like vegan or vegetarian and stuff. You can combine incomplete proteins to make complete proteins. Thought that was pretty cool. Protein bars are trash. Stop eating them. This is the number. I mean, this one I am so big on with clients. I have yet to see a protein bar come out that is like high enough quality that doesn't screw somebody's digestion up. I mean, it's always, especially I remember Quest bars came out. Everybody was walking around like they were 3 months pregnant, but everybody was like, they're so good. I was one of them. That's how I know. I was one of those people. But I just really prefer to eliminate protein bars altogether. I rarely see any upside from throwing them in unless a client is like out traveling, they're absolutely freaking starving. They've got no food in sight and they're at a gas station and it's either a protein bar or a Snickers bar. Honestly, 9 times out of 10, I'd probably say eat the Snickers bar because it probably wouldn't mess up your digestion as much and you'd still get calories in. But that one's up to you and how you want to handle with your clients. I'm just not an advocate of protein bars. As far as what?
Sorry, I keep interrupting. Is that because of just purely digestion reasons? Because like I can eat protein bars and be totally good. So is it just because of digestion?
It's a little bit of both. Like I just like, if you look at kind of like the ingredient blends and how they make protein bars, it's definitely not like a super high quality protein source. Right. You know what I mean? So yeah. I would just prefer, you know what I mean? If you got fully cooked steak in front of you, you got a protein bar and you choose the protein bar, I would definitely prefer you choose the steak. So like if you're in a bind and your digestion can handle it, for sure, throw them in there. But 9 times out of 10, a client's digestion is going to get thrown to shit for it, for sure. Protein powders, same thing. I like to limit protein powders 1 to 2 scoops a day, absolute max. I would say for females, I don't like more than 1 scoop. Men, I can tolerate it a little bit more to 2, but again, going back to like the king protein source being somewhere, animal protein sources, I'm always going to prefer that my clients eat high quality protein. I would much rather you eat it. You're going to get a lot more bang for your buck. You're going to get better amino acid profiles. You're going to get better sources of protein altogether from it. That kind of makes sense to everybody. Right. I mean, I think it would be obvious for us to say like a steak versus a scoop of protein, like which one's actually a better quality protein source, not which one spikes muscle protein synthesis faster, because that's not derived as a quality protein source, right? It's just it's almost like the glycemic index. You know what I mean? Like people, this is just a good example of what I mean by like them spiking one more than the other and saying it's better or worse. So for the glycemic index, and I'll probably talk on this again in the carb call, like they say, you know, white rice spikes faster than brown rice. So therefore brown rice is better than white rice, right? Like that's like the argument. But I mean, if you look at the breakdown of it, brown rice actually has fat content in it. And fats are the slowest digesting macronutrient. So they're going to cause the whole meal to digest slower as a whole. So white rice just doesn't have fats in it. So it digests faster, which is why it spikes your insulin faster. Does that mean it's necessarily worse or better? Absolutely not, right? I'm pretty sure that argument was put to rest a long time ago, but that was just kind of what I came to my head to kind of talk about, like a fast acting protein versus a steak. What if carbs and fats get too high? This is something that I personally do. I can't say there's any I can't say that there's any like supporting data that you can go find on this. This is something that I've learned over my, 7-8 years of coaching people. When carbs and fats get past a certain point, I'm probably going to increase protein again from there. So if I have somebody's protein threshold met and then carbs and fats, let's just use an example. Let's say I've got Brooke here at 180 protein, and that's like her max. She can eat 180 grams of protein from quality protein sources. Digestion's fine. Anything higher than that, the digestion starts to kind of tank. Now we've got our carbs at 400. We've got her fats at 80. And you guys can mute yourself. That'd be great. So we've got her carbs and fats are super high. As a byproduct of carbs and fats being high and being tracked, protein is going to start adding up as a byproduct, right? You guys get that? Like you do a cup of oatmeal, it's like 10 grams of protein, but you're eating it as a carb. You're doing peanut butter, there's protein in it. So the reason, I'll read the slide now. The reason for this is how quickly protein can add up as a byproduct of the carb and fat sources. So as these food goes up, as your carbs and fats go up, right? Because we reached the protein threshold, that's good. We're not going to move it. As your protein and carbs start to come up, the quality of the protein you're consuming usually goes down. Because if you're at 180 protein and just by getting your carbs and fats in, you're tracking 90 grams of protein as a byproduct. Well, you've only got 90 grams of, you only got 50% of your daily protein that you can actually use a quality protein source to get. Does that make sense? Yeah. So instead of, if you were eating 4 meals of chicken, now you realistically can only fit in 2 meals of chicken because your protein is adding up from carb and fat sources. So by increasing protein here and there to keep up with higher carb and fat macros, we ensure that the quality of protein consumed in the diet is kept high. I will say, because I feel like this question is going to happen, like it's past the threshold, right? Brooke's threshold was 180, and now I'm bumping it up to 200 or 220. Isn't her digestion going to be shit? I'll say 9 times out of 10, more often than most, I don't see the digestion get off too much when I'm increasing protein, when the carbs and fats are this high, just because the overall protein being consumed isn't like the higher quality meats that need to get broken down. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay, cool. So now I believe this next slide kind of correlates off of what I just talked about. Yes. Boom. Perfect. So digestive issues with these proteins, because that's my number one, is digestion good? Cool. So clients who have issues digesting protein, is protein the issue? Usually no, right? Unless we get past their threshold, right? But I'm saying as a byproduct, if you have somebody who says, oh my God, every single time I eat protein, I'm super bloated. Anybody ever had a client like this? Anytime I eat protein, I blow up like a balloon. I just can't eat protein. I don't like protein. Cool. So I actually had a client of mine who was like this after she prepped. And usually they have some imbalance in stomach enzymes that break down protein, or it's a stomach acid issue. So if it's a stomach, I'll usually go with stomach enzymes first, because that's the most common. Okay. So really all we need is kind of like a little bit of support here. And I don't need to do this long term, but a supplement I use for every time somebody's having issues digesting protein is I'll use beta-aine HCI. Okay. I'll do that with protein meals for a few weeks, see if it improves. Again, 9 times out of 10, it usually does. However, stomach acid may be low. So there's a really cool at-home test that this client I'm referencing, she actually found it on her own, and I'm going to use it here because I've been using it for multiple people and it works. So the test is you can take 4 ounces of water and you mix in 1 teaspoon of baking soda and you drink it. Okay. So after you drink this, you set a timer for 5 minutes. And ideally, the client's going to burp between minute 2 or 3. If they don't burp within 5 minutes, then we can assume that stomach acid is low. Now, things that okay, that's where it ends. That's where my presentation ends. I'm going to leave this right here so you guys can finish writing it down, and then we'll stop sharing the screen and talk a little bit more. If stomach acid is low, I definitely had another slide on this. It must have not saved, son of a bitch. This presentation just really wants to be a wreck today, doesn't it? Excuse me. So if stomach acid is low, there's a couple different things that I'll do here. Usually I'll actually pull water down. And like I told you guys before, 1.5 gallons is usually like my place I like to be. So if somebody's having issues digesting protein or digesting meals in general, what I will do is I'll drop them down to a gallon of water, because too much water can't, and I know some people argue with me on this, but it works literally. This is one that I say works 10 times out of 10. A lot of people argue that, like, your stomach acid, doing this and that can't change stomach acid. Your stomach will produce or not produce, as much as it needs. It's not entirely true. There's individual variants all the time. So what I will do, I'll drop water, and because too much water can dilute your stomach acid. And if we're having a hard time digesting protein and our stomach acid is very diluted, well, the acidity and the potency isn't going to help us break down protein any better. So what I will do is I will have my clients stop drinking water about 15 minutes before a meal. So if dinner's getting cooked, no water 15 minutes before that meal, we're going to eat that meal, and then we're going to wait an additional 15 minutes, and then we'll start drinking water again. And I found that this is like a freaking incredible fix for digestion and being able to digest protein. You could utilize betaine here as well. You could pop the betaine at that 15-minute mark, drink the water, let it get down there, eat your meal, wait, and then drink water again. And I will say I see the most amount of improvements in digestion when I'm adding that in. Is everybody done writing this down? Cool. I'll stop sharing my screen. Are there any questions? Questions, concerns, comments?
I have a comment.
Yeah.
So when I was in prep, and this was like towards the tail end of my prep, when I would do like really intense cardio, I would smell almost like ammonia. If any of you guys have cats, like the smell of their pee, I would smell that through my nose and it would burn. And so I was in class one day. Yeah, Chelsea too. I was in class one day with Dr. Campbell, and we were talking about protein and protein synthesis and how if you are burning through your protein or your muscle, how it'll actually you'll smell ammonia, or you'll be releasing ammonia.
That's the glucogenesis that we talked about on the
Yes.
slide. That's exactly what's going on there.
Yeah. So if you guys are like doing intense cardio, and I think I was at like 50 carb, like at the tail end. And yeah, I was starting to smell ammonia. Pretty wild.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, so let me go. There was a couple questions in the chat. So Caleb, if protein powder is animal based, not whey, how do you feel about pushing 2 to 3 shakes, especially if protein is 300 grams? So Caleb's eating a pretty substantial amount of protein right now. And here's my thing. What does digestion do? You know, if we can handle 3 shakes a day and digestion's good, then I'm fine with it if protein's that high, but I will still fall back into my same opinion. 1 to 2 scoops a day is where I prefer people to be, and I prefer eating the protein on top of that. You know, if I can snag 300 grams of protein a day without any protein shake, so can you. But you know, people's schedules get in the way. There's that convenience factor to it, which I totally get and I'm totally fine with. So I would say, dude, you could do 3 scoops a day and see how your body responds, see if digestion's good. I find that when we start getting a little bit higher than that in the protein, like stool starts to get a little runny and a little uncomfortable. And that's not really a position I like anybody to be in, especially if you're doing heavy squats on a program. That's just asking for a disaster. You know what I mean? Yeah. Does that answer your question, Caleb? He's not even listening. Oh, okay. He's listening. Oh. Anybody else have any questions, comments, concerns, interpretations of data?
I have a question, and it's not necessarily protein related though.
That's
It
fine.
was a question my client asked me. I train with her every day, so she is really lean and we're putting muscle on her, but she's had some acne issues, so she went to her doctor and he didn't do any blood work. He was just like, oh, it's because your testosterone's too high, so we're going to put you on something that lowers it. But it hasn't helped at all. And then she also read something, I don't know how accurate this is, that because she was eating oatmeal in the morning for breakfast, she was like, I read something that said that eating oatmeal in the morning would throw off your hormone. I was like, I don't.
So here's the thing with that. I guarantee you I'd do a Google search for just about anything throwing off my hormones and find it.
Yeah, I was like, I follow a lot of confident like coaches with bodybuilding and health in general, and that's never been something that I've seen. But
So here's the thing. First of all, I have had so many truffles with doctors today alone, just getting on my nerves. Let me tell you that much. But diagnosing somebody with high testosterone without even knowing if they have high testosterone is
he was like,
honestly,
here's
it's just reckless. Like that's all it is it's reckless. I don't know what he put her on. Clearly it's not working, so I would stop. If we're using something for a specific purpose and it's not working, stop taking it. Like I want as little things going into the body as possible when it comes to things like that. My power pack thing that I use for people with body acne is I'll use pantothenic acid. It's basically
Okay.
a B5 compound. So I'll run this really high and really aggressive. I'm kind of more of like a throat punch when it comes to acne. Boom, I want to get it done as soon as possible. So I'll do 5,000 mgs a day, 5,000 of pantothenic acid. Take that with meal one. You can split it up into 2 meals. There's ones on Amazon that are 1,000 milligram tablets. I haven't found anything more dense than that, and they're pretty big pills. Like it's a tough pill to swallow, so to speak. So I would do like maybe three pills with meal one, 2 pills with meal 4. That should stop new acne flare-ups almost immediately. And then within the week, she should notice her acne starting to dry out. Even if it's from a higher androgen activity, I would get blood work done for sure to see if androgens are high. If she does have high testosterone, you can throw in saw palmetto. That's what I use if I have high androgen activity in females. Depending on how high it is how I would dose it though. So that's kind of hard. I mean, a good starting point, you do like 325 milligrams of saw palmetto 2 times a day. And that's if she has high androgen activity. I don't know we don't know if she does. It's just guesswork.
We don't know if that's, I mean, plus she's just went through a lot and has like a lot of stress because of divorce and kids and all that.
Well, stress can definitely induce acne.
Yeah,
So I think something that we always have to understand with acne, and this, dude, I guarantee you guys are all gonna have clients who deal with acne. So it's a really important one because, like, again, we're coaching people to feel and look their best, and it's really hard to feel good about yourself when you got acne everywhere. So I did a lot of research on acne and hair regrowth. I'm your fucking guy, dude, straight up, because I dealt with both of them and it just crushed my confidence. So acne is an inflammatory response in your body. That's what it is. And like, whenever we go, oh, I've got acne, and we go to the doctor and they go, hey, put this cream on. That is the exact equivalent, in my opinion. That's the exact equivalent of you eating something, being bloated, and you putting a Band-Aid on it and going like, this should help, right? Because it's an internal issue. Every single time it's an internal issue. Now, obviously, if you get some like weird, like bacon grease on your skin, you're obviously going to break out, but again, 9 times out of 10, it is an internal issue. Your skin is an organ. So if it's breaking out, there is an inflammatory response internal in your body that needs to be corrected. And this could even be a byproduct of like eating too much protein and your body is having an inflammatory response. It could be a certain food you're eating. It could be stress from a divorce that's throwing things off and causing inflammation everywhere. You could be training too hard and the systems are free. There's so many things. There's people who can break out when they eat peanut butter because their body responds bad to it, So there's so many things that I would jump to before going, you got high testosterone, take this.
Yeah.
But I'm not a doctor.
Okay, I have a question.
Cool.
What about your thoughts on like something like an appetite booster, supplementation, especially when protein's like really high, like when you're pushing calories really, really high and protein's like 300 or something like that. What are your thoughts on like an appetite booster just to help get food down since protein is so satiating?
I love growth hormone as an appetite enhancer. If an athlete can, like, I like growth hormone for men and women. Obviously I coach competitors, but growth hormone doesn't have any androgen activity to it, which is really nice. And growth hormone definitely helps with appetite. You can do a peptide like GHRP6, which is kind of like a derivative of growth hormone. A lot of people who get growth hormone, they're actually getting GHRP6, but that one's huge for appetite increasing. That's a peptide that if I need somebody to eat, 8,000 calories a day, that's usually what I'll use. But as far as like other appetite enhancers, I prefer to just remove as many appetite suppressants as I can. So if somebody needs to move a ton of food, I'm going to lower stress. I'm probably going to have them on no caffeine at all. Eating very like calorie dense meals, probably adding protein shakes if they can't stomach the calories overall. Like, what can we do the most to like get the most amount of calories from the least amount of food. Those are the type of things that I'll do before anything. But if you're pushing somebody up for a good amount of time in calories, and obviously there's a point in time when we're growing and when we're cutting where we need to have like that uncomfortable feel from our diet. We're trying to change our bodies. It's not going to be smooth sailing. But if I'm pushing somebody up in food for, X amount of time, and it's been 8 weeks and their appetite still isn't there, it's probably a sign we need to pull food back and reset a little bit. So I'm not a fan of adding things in to increase the appetite, because I'm trying to go off of what the actual body's biofeedback is telling us, right? If your body's not hungry, there's a reason for it. So instead of me going like, no, I still want you to be hungry, you're right, I would rather pull food down, reset insulin sensitivity, reset appetite, and then continue to push up from there, because they're going to be more responsive. If they're not hungry, more than likely insulin sensitivity is going down. So by us just taking something to open up the appetite and eat more, we're probably not going to grow. We're probably just going to put on body fat, and then it just becomes, and that's fucking expensive to eat that much too.
Yeah.
So that's kind of my thoughts around it. But also I'm not against adding in an appetite enhancer if I need to in that contextual time. Anybody else? Cool. Well, we'll end it there, guys. Look at that, right on the dot, 7:00. Holy crap. So for those of you who did just get here, I am about to do an additional call after this. I think Ashlyn just posted it in the Facebook group that I saw. So if you guys go back to the Facebook group, you can get on an additional Zoom link, and I'm going to do a deep dive call on taxes right now and how you guys can set yourselves up to pay the least amount of taxes, set yourself up to kind of get around those loopholes for your businesses and stuff. So that's open to everybody. I'll film it, record it, and put it in the Coaching Collective call. But if everybody wants to turn on their cameras real quick so I can do a little boomerang for the Coaching Collective, that would be sick. And we'll give some little peace signs. Wait for it, wait for it, wait for it. All right, that'll work. All right. Got some personal information up on this computer behind it. Hang on. All right, on 3. 1, 2, 3. Sick. All right, guys, that is up for the call. Let me